The paper slid across the conference table and stopped directly in front of me. My manager's finger tapped it twice, each tap deliberate and loud enough for everyone to hear. "You missed your targets," Derek said. His voice was calm, almost bored, like he was reading a grocery list. The room went silent. 20 people sat around that table, and I felt every single pair of eyes turn toward me. My throat tightened. Heat crawled up my neck and settled in my cheeks. I looked down at the numbers on the page. They were mine. I recognized the format, the categories, the data points. But something was wrong. The figures were incomplete. They were missing entire sections from the comprehensive report I'd sent him 3 weeks ago. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a mistake. The numbers he was showing everyone weren't just wrong, they were strategically edited. He'd cherry-picked the failures and hidden the successes. I opened my mouth to speak, but Derek was already moving to the next slide. My coworker Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her seat beside me. Across the table, Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. The humiliation was immediate and crushing. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, feeling my reputation crumble in real time. I'd worked here for 6 years, built relationships, and earned trust. And now, in front of everyone who mattered, I was being painted as incompetent. "As you can see," Derek continued, pointing at another chart, "there's been a downward trend over the last quarter." His voice was steady, professional, almost sympathetic, like he regretted having to expose me this way. But I knew better. I'd seen that report he was using. I created it. And what he was showing the room was a fraction of the truth, the worst fraction, carefully selected to make me look incompetent. Someone coughed. Someone else scribbled notes. I watched them all absorbing this narrative, believing it, probably wondering how I'd gotten away with poor performance for so long. My hands trembled slightly under the table. I pressed them flat against my thighs to stop the shaking. "We'll need to discuss accountability moving forward," Derek said, closing his laptop with a soft click. That word, accountability, landed like a punch. I'd been accountable. I documented everything. I'd sent him detailed reports with timestamps and data sources. I'd followed every protocol, met every deadline, exceeded every reasonable expectation. And now he was using my own work against me, twisted and incomplete, to paint me as a failure. The injustice of it burned in my chest, but I kept my face carefully blank. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. The meeting ended with chairs scraping against tile and the shuffle of papers being gathered. People filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact with me. I sat there for a moment longer, staring at the printed chart Derek had left on the table. My name was at the top. Below it, a red highlighted summary of missed targets. Amanda touched my shoulder briefly as she passed. "Sorry," she whispered, but she didn't stop walking. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. The walk back to my desk felt endless. The office suddenly seemed too bright, too loud, too full of people who now saw me differently. My manager accused me of missing targets. I sent the report he ignored. That sentence played on repeat in my head as I sat down at my computer. It wasn't just a fact. It was a weapon he'd used against me, and everyone in that room had watched him do it. I pulled up my email and searched for the message I'd sent 3 weeks ago. There it was, time-stamped and documented. Subject: Q3 Performance Analysis. Complete report status. Opened. He'd received it. He'd read it. And he'd ignored it. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct told me to fire off an angry email, to defend myself, to demand answers. But something stopped me. A quiet voice in the back of my mind reminded me that Derek had planned this carefully. He'd chosen a public setting, controlled the narrative, and positioned himself as the reasonable authority figure. If I reacted emotionally now, I'd only prove whatever story he was telling about me. My name is Lauren Hartley, and until that meeting I believed in fairness. I'm 34 years old, methodical by nature, and allergic to workplace drama. I'd spent 6 years at Morrison Analytics building a reputation as someone dependable. I hit deadlines. I double-checked my work. I didn't make waves. I wasn't the loudest person in the room, but I was often the most prepared. That used to matter. I joined Morrison straight out of graduate school, eager to prove myself in data analytics. The work was challenging but rewarding. I loved finding patterns in numbers, turning raw data into actionable insights. For the first 4 years, I'd had a different manager, Patricia, who valued precision and gave credit where it was due. Under her leadership, I'd been promoted twice. Then Patricia retired and Derek Pullman took over. First, he seemed fine. Professional. Competent. He'd worked in a different department and had a reputation for driving results. But within months, I started noticing small things. My reports appearing in his presentations without attribution. My ideas are mentioned in leadership meetings as if they were his. Praise that should have come to me being redirected upward. Nothing blatant enough to challenge. Just enough to make me feel invisible. I told myself I was being sensitive. That this was how corporate hierarchies worked. That good work would eventually speak for itself. I was wrong about all of it. 3 weeks before that meeting, I'd sent Derek the complete Q3 analysis. It was comprehensive, 42 pages of data, trends, projections, and recommendations. I'd spent 2 weeks compiling it, cross-referencing sources, and running multiple verification checks. It represented hundreds of hours of work, not just from that quarter but from ongoing projects I'd been managing for over a year. The email was clear and professional. Derek, please find attached the complete Q3 performance analysis. All targets were met or exceeded in 7 of 9 categories. The 2 areas showing decline have detailed explanations in sections 4 and 5, along with recommended interventions. Let me know if you need any clarification. I'd sent it on a Tuesday morning at 9:15. By that afternoon, the email showed as read. I waited 2 days for a response. Nothing. I sent a follow-up on Thursday. Just checking if you received the Q3 report. Happy to discuss any sections in detail. Read. No reply. By the following Monday, I told myself he was just busy. Managers had a lot on their plates. Maybe he'd bring it up in our next one-on-one. He canceled that meeting. And the next one. Looking back now, his silence wasn't neglect. It was a strategy. He was already deciding how to use my work against me, and responding to my emails would have created a record of acknowledgement he didn't want. The pattern became clearer the longer I worked under Derek. In team meetings, he'd present insights I'd developed, using slightly different phrasing but the same core analysis. When leadership praised the work, he'd nod and say, "We've been focusing on that area," never specifying who we included. My contributions were absorbed into his narrative of departmental success. I was mentioned occasionally but always in passing, always as part of a larger team effort, never as the primary driver. First, I told myself this was normal. Managers take credit for their team's work. That's how organizations function. But then I noticed he didn't do this with everyone. Marcus got public recognition for a client presentation that I'd helped him build. Amanda's name appeared on a report she'd co-authored with me, mine didn't. Derek had favorites. People who laughed at his jokes, who stayed late for after-work drinks, who mirrored his management style. I wasn't one of them. I was competent, not charismatic. Thorough, not political. And in Derek's world, that made me expendable. The realization hit me slowly, over months of small slights. He wasn't just a bad manager. He was actively managing me out, piece by piece, taking credit for my successes while documenting my failures. The night after the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment he'd tapped that paper, the way my coworkers had looked at me, the certainty in his voice when he said I'd dropped the ball. At 2 a.m, I opened my laptop and pulled up the original report I'd sent him. Subject: Q3 Performance Analysis Complete. Report date: October 8th, 9:15 a.m. Status: Read October 8th, 2:47 p.m. I clicked through to the read receipt. He'd opened it hours after I'd sent it. The email tracking showed he'd downloaded the attachment. I scrolled through the document itself, checking every page, every data point, every conclusion. 7 of 9 targets exceeded. 2 targets missed by narrow margins, both with documented external factors and recovery plans. Detailed recommendations for Q4 improvements. Strategic insights that aligned with company objectives. The report Derek had shown in the meeting contained only the 2 missed targets. Everything else, all the success, all the context, all the strategic recommendations had been stripped away. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. I saved everything to a separate folder on my personal drive. The original report. The email thread. The read receipts. Screenshots of the version history showing when each section was created. That was the night I stopped trusting intentions and started trusting records. The meeting invitation appeared in my inbox 3 days later. Performance alignment discussion attendees. Lauren Hartley, Derek Pullman, Vanessa Moore. HR date: October 24, 10 a.m. My stomach dropped when I saw Vanessa's name. HR didn't attend routine check-ins. They attended meetings that needed documentation. I read the invitation 4 times, looking for clues in the sparse details. There was no agenda attached. No preparation materials. Just a time, a room number, and 3 names. I forwarded it to my personal email and added it to the folder I'd started building. That afternoon, Derek stopped by my desk. He leaned against the partition, casual and friendly, like nothing had happened. "Just want to make sure we're aligned before the meeting next week," he said. "I think it'll be a good opportunity to talk about development areas." Development areas. Corporate speak for things you're doing wrong. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I'll be prepared." He smiled. "Great. I know these conversations can feel uncomfortable, but they're really about supporting your growth." The words sounded rehearsed, practiced, like he'd said them before to other people he was planning to push out. I watched him walk away, that casual confidence in every step. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I'd react emotionally, make mistakes, give him ammunition. He had no idea I was already building a case. I started watching more carefully after that. I noticed which emails Derek CC'd me on and which ones he didn't. I saw how he'd loop in senior leadership on projects that were going well, making sure his name was prominent. When things went poorly, those emails became much smaller, just him and the person responsible. I wasn't the only one he managed this way, but I was the most recent target. I began documenting everything. Not just my own work, but the patterns around it. Who got credited in meetings? Whose names appeared on reports? Which projects got visibility and which ones quietly disappeared? I created a timeline in a private spreadsheet, tracking every instance where my work had been reused, reframed, or reassigned without acknowledgement. The pattern was undeniable. Derek wasn't just a bad manager. He was a strategic one. He knew how to build himself up by keeping others small. And he'd gotten away with it because most people didn't fight back, they just left. Patricia had mentioned something once, during her last week before retirement. "Watch out for the politics," she'd said. "Not everyone values the same things we do." I nodded, assuming she meant general office dynamics. Now I understood she'd been warning me specifically about Derek. But I wasn't going to leave quietly. I was going to let him bury himself. The performance alignment meeting was exactly what I'd expected. Vanessa from HR sat with a legal pad and a carefully neutral expression. Derek had a folder with printed documents. I had nothing but my memory and my composure. "Thanks for making time, Lauren," Derek began. "I wanted to use this space to discuss some concerns about consistency in your deliverables." Consistency. The same word Amanda had warned me about. "Can you give me specific examples?" I asked calmly. Derek slid a paper across the table, the same incomplete chart from the earlier meeting. "Your Q3 performance shows gaps," he said. "And we haven't seen the kind of proactive communication we'd expect at your level." I didn't react. I didn't argue. I just took notes. Vanessa watched me carefully, probably expecting emotion, tears, defensiveness, something she could document as resistant to feedback. Instead, I asked questions. Which deliverables specifically felt inconsistent? What communication would have been more proactive? Can you clarify the timeline you're referencing? Each question was calm, professional, designed to make him explain himself in detail. And with every answer, he dug deeper. He referenced reports I'd supposedly not completed, reports that were sitting in his inbox. He mentioned meetings where I'd been unavailable, meetings he'd canceled. He described a pattern of behavior that didn't match any documentation. I wrote everything down, my pen moving steadily across the page. "I'd like to submit the full Q3 report for the record," I said near the end of the meeting. Derek's expression flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. "That won't be necessary," he said quickly. "We've already reviewed the relevant data." I turned to Vanessa. "I sent a comprehensive analysis 3 weeks ago. I think it would provide helpful context for this conversation." Vanessa made a note. Please forward that to me after this meeting. Derek shifted in his seat. Like I said, we've reviewed what we needed to review. But the damage was done. Vanessa had acknowledged my request in front of him. If the report didn't make it into the file now, that would raise questions. I sent it to her within 15 minutes of leaving the room. The email was simple. Vanessa, as discussed, please find attached the complete Q3 performance analysis submitted to Derek on October 8th. All supporting documentation and data sources are included. Please let me know if you need any clarification. I CC'd my personal email address just to be safe. That night, I pulled everything together into one comprehensive folder. Emails with timestamps, calendar invites showing canceled one-on-ones, reports with version histories proving when content was created and by whom, screenshots of internal SharePoint files showing attribution changes. I organized it all chronologically and saved it in 3 places: my personal drive, a cloud backup, and a physical USB drive I kept in my apartment. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. Because Derek had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated how much I documented. He thought I was just quiet, compliant, grateful to have a job. He didn't realize that quiet people often see the most. And that compliance doesn't mean consent. I'd spent 6 years in this company building a reputation for thoroughness. Every report I'd ever submitted had sources cited, methodology explained, and conclusions supported by data. That same attention to detail now extended to protecting myself. I went through my sent emails folder, searching for every message I'd sent Derek over the past year. I found 37 instances where I'd submitted work that later appeared in presentations or reports without my name attached. 37 times. I created a spreadsheet documenting each one, with links to the original submissions and the final versions where my attribution had disappeared. 2 weeks after the HR meeting, something shifted. Derek stopped making direct eye contact in the hallway. Our scheduled one-on-one was moved, then canceled entirely. Projects I'd been leading were quietly reassigned without explanation. At first, I thought it meant he was escalating, preparing to push me out. But then I noticed other things. Vanessa from HR walked through our floor more frequently. A senior director I didn't recognize sitting in on a team meeting. Unusual calendar blocks appearing on Derek's schedule with vague titles like Leadership Sync and Strategic Review. Someone was asking questions. And Derek was starting to sweat. I watched him in meetings now, seeing things I'd missed before. The way he deflected questions about project details. How he'd reference the team when he didn't know specifics. The slight pause before he answered anything technical. Derek was a manager who'd stopped doing the actual work years ago. He relied on people like me to generate the insights, then repackage them as his own strategic thinking. It had worked for him until now. But cracks were showing. The email came on a Thursday morning. From Vanessa Moore, Human Resources, subject, documentation request. Lauren, as part of a routine audit of reporting practices, we're gathering samples of work products from Q2 and Q3. Could you please provide copies of any major reports or analyses you completed during that period? Please include any supporting documentation that shows the development timeline and attribution. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. Routine audit. That phrase was doing a lot of work. Audits weren't routine. They were triggered. I replied within an hour, attaching everything. The original Q3 report. The Q2 analysis Derek had used in a leadership presentation without crediting me. A summary document I'd created that had later appeared almost word for word in a departmental strategy memo under his name. I didn't editorialize. I didn't accuse. I just provided exactly what was requested, with timestamps and metadata intact. Every file included version history showing when it was created, who created it, and what changes had been made. The digital breadcrumbs were impossible to ignore. That afternoon, I got called into a meeting I hadn't been expecting. Just me and a woman I didn't recognize, Claudia Torres, Senior Director of Operations. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Can you walk me through your reporting process for Q3? She asked. I did. Step by step. Data collection, analysis methodology, quality checks, final compilation. And when did you deliver this to your manager? October 8th, 9:15 in the morning. Did you receive feedback? No. Follow-up questions? No. She made notes, her pen moving quickly across the page. Then she turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was the chart Derek had used in the meeting, the incomplete one. Do you recognize this? Yes. It's a portion of my report. Only a portion? Yes. It excludes 7 of the 9 target areas and removes all contextual analysis. Claudia leaned back, studying me. Why didn't you escalate this when it happened? I met her eyes. Because I assumed professionalism would be enough. The words hung between us. She didn't respond immediately, just held my gaze for a long moment. Then she closed her laptop. Thank you for your time, Lauren. Someone will follow up with you soon. The days that followed felt surreal. Derek's demeanor changed completely. The confidence was gone. In meetings, he second-guessed himself. He over-explained decisions. He started seeing more people on emails, as if building witnesses to his competence. It was the behavior of someone who knew he was being watched. Our team noticed. Conversations became quieter. People stopped volunteering information. The energy in the office felt tense, like everyone was waiting for something to break. Amanda caught me by the coffee machine one morning. What's going on? She asked quietly. I don't know, I lied. But I did know. The walls were closing in and Derek could feel it. I'd seen this before in my previous role at a different company. A manager who'd been playing fast and loose with attribution, taking credit for work that wasn't his. When leadership finally investigated, the unraveling was swift. Derek was in that phase now, the desperate scramble to cover tracks that were already too visible. I kept my head down in my documentation current. The meeting invitation appeared without warning. Operational Review Reporting Standards Attendees. Claudia Torres, Vanessa Moore, Senior Leadership. My name wasn't on the list. But Derek's was. I stared at my screen, reading and rereading the calendar entry. The meeting was scheduled for 2 hours. That wasn't a routine check-in. I didn't hear what happened in that room. But I saw Derek afterward. His face was pale. His tie was loosened. He walked past my desk without looking at me, moving quickly toward the elevator. For the first time since this started, he looked small. Marcus watched him go, then glanced at me with raised eyebrows. I shrugged, pretending I didn't know what was happening. But I knew. Derek had spent years building a reputation on other people's work. And now, when asked to defend specific decisions and explain technical details, he couldn't. Because he'd never actually done the work. The next morning, Derek's office door was closed. It stayed closed all day. By afternoon, Vanessa was on our floor again, talking quietly with Claudia. They disappeared into the conference room, and when they emerged an hour later, they both looked serious. Marcus leaned over to my desk. Something's happening. I nodded but didn't say anything. That evening, I received an email from Claudia. Lauren, would you be available tomorrow at 10 to discuss next steps for your role? Next steps. My stomach flipped, but this time it wasn't from anxiety. It was from hope. I'd spent weeks waiting for this moment, documenting everything, staying calm when every instinct told me to fight back loudly. Now it was finally happening. The truth was surfacing, and I hadn't had to force it. I just had to make sure it was impossible to ignore. Claudia's office was on the executive floor, a space I'd only visited once before for a company-wide presentation. She gestured for me to sit and close the door. I want to start by apologizing, she said. I blinked, surprised. We should have caught this sooner. The patterns were there. But we rely on managers to surface issues, and in this case, your manager was the issue. She opened a folder on her desk. We've completed an internal review of reporting attribution and performance documentation across your department. What we found was concerning. She didn't say Derek's name. She didn't need to. Multiple instances of work product being presented without proper attribution. Reports submitted by team members appearing in leadership materials under management credit only. And in your case specifically, a performance review based on incomplete data that directly contradicted documentation you'd submitted. I sat quietly, letting her continue. We'd like to offer you a transition, Claudia said. A new role reporting directly to me. Same level for now, but with a clear path for advancement. Better visibility, and a team that values the kind of thorough documentation you've demonstrated. I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle. What happens to Derek? Claudia's expression didn't change. Personnel matters are confidential. But you won't be reporting to him anymore. Derek was gone within 2 weeks. No announcement. No farewell email. No goodbye lunch with the team. Just an empty office and a nameplate removed from the door. People noticed, of course. Rumors spread quickly, some accurate, some exaggerated. I didn't participate in the speculation. I didn't need to. The truth had already done its work. Amanda stopped by my desk the day after Derek's departure was confirmed. I knew something was wrong, she said. That meeting with the charts. I knew those numbers didn't tell the whole story. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, not accusing, just curious. She looked uncomfortable. I didn't want to get involved. And I told myself maybe I was wrong. I understood. It was easier to stay quiet, to assume someone else would speak up, to hope the problem would resolve itself. I'd done the same thing for months. My new role came with a desk on a different floor, a team that actually listened when I spoke, and leadership that valued documentation as much as I did. The first time I presented in a meeting and Claudia said, "Lauren developed this analysis," I almost didn't know how to respond. Recognition felt foreign after so long without it. But I got used to it. My new team was smaller but more collaborative. People asked questions, shared credit, and built on each other's ideas instead of competing for attention. It was everything my old environment hadn't been. I started mentoring a junior analyst named Kyle who reminded me of myself 6 years ago. Talented, thorough, and a little too trusting. Document everything, I told him during our first one-on-one. Not because you're paranoid, but because you're protecting your work. He nodded, taking notes. And if something feels wrong, trust that instinct. You don't have to react immediately, but start keeping records. 3 months into my new role, Amanda stopped by my new desk. I should have said something, she admitted. In that meeting, when he showed those numbers, I knew something was off. I shook my head. It wasn't your fight. Still, she said, I'm glad you didn't let it go. I hadn't let it go. But I also hadn't fought loudly. I'd fought carefully, quietly, with records and timestamps and questions that forced the truth into the light. How did you stay so calm? Amanda asked. When it was happening, you never seemed angry. I was angry, I admitted. But anger wasn't going to change anything. Documentation would. She smiled. You're kind of a hero around here now. People are being more careful about attribution. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who'd finally learned to protect herself. Months later, I ran into Vanessa in the hallway. How are you settling in? She asked. Really well, I said honestly. She nodded. For what it's worth, your documentation made the review process much easier. Most people don't keep records like that. I've learned to protect myself, I replied. She smiled, but it was tinged with something sad. More people should. We stood there for a moment, both understanding what she wasn't saying, that I wasn't the first person Derek had done this to. Just the first one who documented it thoroughly enough to prove it. Is he still in the industry? I asked. Vanessa's expression became carefully neutral. I can't discuss that. But I can say that references were provided accurately, which meant his next employer would know exactly why he'd left. I never spoke to Derek again. No closure. No confrontation. No final words. And I realized I didn't need any of that. He tried to erase me, and instead he'd erased himself. His attempt to make me look incompetent had backfired completely. The incomplete report he'd used against me had become evidence of his own dishonesty. The performance review designed to push me out had triggered an investigation that exposed years of taking credit for other people's work. He'd built his own trap and walked right into it. I just made sure all the pieces were visible when people finally looked. Looking back now, I understand what happened differently than I did when I was living through it. Derek mistook my quietness for weakness. He thought that because I didn't fight loudly, I wouldn't fight at all. But silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. I didn't win by shouting or making scenes. I won by keeping records, asking calm questions, and trusting that the truth would surface when given the chance. Derek buried himself with his own arrogance. I just made sure there was a clear paper trail when people started digging. Now I sit in meetings where my name is attached to my work. I lead projects that get recognized. I mentor younger analysts and tell them the same thing every time: document everything. Not because you're paranoid, because you're prepared. Because in a world where people will take credit for your work, your documentation is your voice. And sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to someone else. It's what you become when they're no longer in your way. I'm not the same person who sat in that conference room 6 months ago, watching her reputation get destroyed in real time. I'm stronger now, more aware, less willing to accept mistreatment in the name of professionalism. The experience taught me that staying silent about injustice doesn't make you professional. It makes you vulnerable. But speaking up doesn't mean shouting. Sometimes it means quietly collecting evidence until the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Derek thought he could rewrite my story. Instead, I rewrote his ending.